It was a typical day in the desert. The heat was suffocating, the sand was relentless, and the noise of helicopters and military trucks created a constant hum in the background. I had been deployed for almost 6 months, each day blending into the next as I did my duty. My name is Jack Daniels, yes, the same as the whiskey, but I'm not that interesting. I'm 32, a combat medic, and had been married to Lisa for almost 5 years. Or at least I thought I had. When you're deployed, the last thing you expect is to get a life-changing letter from home. But that's exactly what I got one afternoon, when the wind was howling and the sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the base. It wasn't a package from home, or a care package filled with snacks and letters from friends. No, it was a simple, flat envelope. The kind you don't open until you've prepared yourself for the worst. I ripped it open and pulled out the contents. Divorce papers. No explanation. No, I miss you or I want to talk. Just a cold, sterile notification that my wife had made up her mind and filed for divorce. I can't do this anymore, the letter said. I need to live my life without waiting for you to come home. My stomach dropped. The words felt like a punch to the gut, and my world tilted for a second. Lisa, the woman I had married, the one I thought I was building a future with, had given up on me while I was hundreds of miles away, risking my life. It hit hard. It hurt in ways I couldn't have imagined. But in that moment, I wasn't going to let myself fall apart. I wasn't going to let her decision dictate how my story ended. You see, I wasn't like the others who would have called home, angry and broken, demanding answers or begging for a second chance. I knew better. I knew that if I wanted to truly regain control of my life, I had to play the game differently. I had a plan that would not only get me back on my feet, but also ensure that I wouldn't be the one left broken by the end of this. I folded the papers back up, slipping them into my bag. I didn't let the rage take over. Instead, I made a decision. If she thought she could throw everything away, so could I. I had a new mission now. And this time, the battlefield wasn't in the desert. It was right here, with me taking control of my own future. I wasn't going to beg for her love. I wasn't going to plead for her to change her mind. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to turn this betrayal into a plan for my own comeback. And this story, this fight, was far from over. I sat there in my bunk for what felt like hours, staring at the divorce papers. It felt surreal, like some bad dream I couldn't wake up from. But then something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to break down. I wasn't going to beg her to reconsider. I knew this was my moment, and instead of letting it break me, I was going to use it to build something better. I had always been a strategist. It's how I survived in the military. Staying one step ahead, adapting quickly, and using what I had to my advantage. This was no different. Lisa thought she could walk away, thought she could leave me high and dry while I was overseas. But I had a plan, and this time the game was going to be mine. First, I needed to get my finances in order. In the chaos of deployment, I had let some things slide. My personal accounts, my investments, even the small business I'd started before going overseas. But I wasn't going to let Lisa's decisions leave me scrambling. I logged into my accounts from the secure internet station at camp, making sure to lock down everything. I transferred assets into an account that only I had access to. I reached out to my financial advisor and got back on track. Every move was calculated, every decision made with precision. No more loose ends. No more vulnerabilities. Next, I started working on a backup plan. I knew the legal battle was coming. Lisa would probably fight for more than just the house. But I had my own set of legal allies, friends from the army who had gone through similar situations. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in divorce cases for military personnel, someone who understood the complexities of military life and its impact on marriage. He explained my rights, and we started gathering evidence of Lisa's infidelity, of the financial moves she'd made behind my back, of the betrayal that stretched far beyond what was written in that cold letter. The key was to stay focused. The key was to remain calm, even when it felt like the walls were closing in. I wasn't going to give in to anger or bitterness. I wasn't going to let Lisa have the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I had bigger plans now, not just for my future, but for my success. I would take the time she thought she had used to destroy me and turn it into an opportunity to build something better, something more rewarding. Each day, as I completed my mission on base, I worked behind the scenes to lay the groundwork for the life I was going to rebuild. I focused on my fitness, honing my body and mind to be sharp, to be ready for anything. I poured myself into my side projects, writing, designing, even investing in a small business I had wanted to get off the ground. With every hour I worked, every task I completed, I felt myself regaining control. I wasn't just sitting there waiting to pick up the pieces of my life. I was actively creating the life I wanted. When you're in the military, you learn to adjust. You learn to improvise and make the most out of any situation. And I was doing exactly that. Lisa might have thought she had gotten the better of me, but she had underestimated me. This wasn't just about getting through a divorce. This was about turning a devastating moment into a stepping stone to something greater. And I had a plan to make it happen. By the time I got the official divorce papers, my plan was already in motion. Every piece of evidence had been carefully gathered. Every document, every record, everything I needed to protect myself was in place. But this wasn't just about protecting what was mine. This was about ensuring that I wouldn't lose anything more to the person who had betrayed me. I wasn't going to let her walk away scot-free, and I wasn't going to let her steal any more of my future. I called David, the lawyer I had been referred to, and set up a meeting. He was a quiet man with graying hair, wearing a suit that seemed a little too big for him. But when he spoke with authority. He understood the stakes, and that's exactly what I needed. He laid out my options, and while some of them were aggressive, they were all in my best interest. The first step was filing for legal separation. I couldn't act too fast, but I couldn't wait either. We had to make sure that everything was locked down, the house, the savings accounts, everything I'd worked for over the years. David explained that a temporary injunction could freeze all assets, preventing Jenna from taking anything else or selling the house while the case was in court. Then came the discovery process. David instructed me to subpoena every bank statement, every email, every transaction. I wasn't just going to fight her on legal grounds. I was going to expose the depth of her betrayal, the affair, the financial deceit. I was going to show the world who she really was, a woman who thought she could play both sides and come out on top. I was relentless. Every day, I spent hours combing through records, checking statements, searching for every scrap of evidence that would prove I wasn't the villain she'd painted me to be. I made calls to the bank, I contacted financial advisors, I reached out to former colleagues who might know something that could help. I had the satisfaction of knowing that every time she made a move, I was one step ahead. She thought she could move quickly, make decisions that left me in the dust. But all her actions were being tracked, documented, and logged. Nothing was slipping past me. Then a breakthrough. One of the bank statements I received showed a suspicious transfer to an unknown account. It wasn't just any transfer. It was large, far larger than anything I had ever seen in our personal finances. The kind of transfer that required a signature. And that signature? It wasn't mine. I brought the evidence to David, who was immediately on the phone with the bank, trying to get more information. It didn't take long to figure out that the transfer had been made with the help of someone Jenna had met. Someone who had been manipulating her into these moves. And it wasn't just financial fraud. It was much worse. The court case was about to take a turn. And I was ready to fight, ready to take back what was mine. Not just the house, not just the money, but my life, my dignity, and my future. Jenna had thought she could pull the rug out from under me. But what she didn't know was that I was building something even stronger. A life where she no longer had any control. The day we filed the official motion to freeze assets, the atmosphere around the base shifted. Every time I passed another soldier, I felt a sense of purpose, a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. But back home, Jenna had no idea what was coming. I had given her space to make her moves, but now the walls were closing in. When David called me with the news that the bank had confirmed the fraudulent transaction, I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The moment that Jenna would finally have to answer for everything she had done. She thought she could play both sides, acting as if she was the victim while draining everything from me. But now, the truth was coming out and there would be no way to hide behind excuses or lies. I was in the middle of a night shift when I got the call from David. "She's hired a lawyer," he said. "And he's good. Really good." My stomach tightened. I knew this was coming, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly it would escalate. Jenna had found a lawyer with a reputation for being aggressive in divorce battles. His name was Victor Graves, a man whose name alone was enough to send shivers down the spine of anyone who had crossed paths with him. Graves wasn't just going to settle for a fair split. He was going to try and bury me to make sure I walked away with as little as possible. Jenna had thought she could outsmart me, but now it seemed like she was getting desperate. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal motions, phone calls, and back-and-forth emails. David and I worked tirelessly to prepare our counterarguments to protect everything I had built. But what David had in his back pocket and what Jenna didn't know was the one thing that would make her unravel. During my investigation, we had found something Jenna hadn't counted on, a series of emails between her and Eric. The emails weren't just about the affair. They were about the money, the scheming, how they had planned everything from the time I left for deployment to the point when they would try to sell the house and make off with my savings. David pored over the emails. "This," he said, "this is everything we need. This proves intent. Fraud. And it's all on her." I knew this wasn't just about getting the house back. It was about taking back my life. But I also knew the fight wouldn't be easy. Victor Graves was good at his job, and I would have to be better. A week later, the court hearing arrived. Jenna showed up with her lawyer, her head held high, her face a mask of indifference. I watched her closely as she took her seat, feeling a bitter sense of irony. Here she was, trying to destroy the life we had built together, acting as though she had nothing to be ashamed of. When the hearing started, I could feel the tension in the room. David presented our case clearly and calmly, laying out the fraud, the stolen money, and the legal evidence we had gathered. But when Graves stood up, the room seemed to grow colder. His argument was smooth, polished. He was good, too good. He tried to paint me as the villain, the one who had abandoned his wife and left her with nothing. But then we played our trump card. David presented the emails. It was like a crack had appeared in the armor. Graves stammered, trying to salvage the situation, but it was too late. The evidence was undeniable. Jenna's face paled as the emails were read aloud in court. She looked over at me for the first time during the hearing, and there it was, the fear I had been waiting for. It was subtle, but it was there. I had won the battle. The court hearing had ended in our favor, but the battle wasn't over. It felt like a temporary victory, a small win in a much larger war. Jenna, however, seemed to think that the tide had turned in her favor. But she didn't realize that her arrogance had made her mistake. She underestimated my ability to play the long game. As the weeks passed, I continued to focus on securing my future. The case wasn't closed, but the legal victories kept piling up. The mortgage company had agreed to halt the sale of the house. My retirement fund was secure, and the court had frozen all joint accounts, preventing Jenna from withdrawing any more money. Every single step was a win, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that I wasn't just fighting for assets. I was fighting to protect the person I had once been. Jenna's lawyer, Victor Graves, had tried to force a settlement. He pushed hard, claiming that we could resolve everything outside of court. He suggested a payout, some form of reconciliation, and end to the legal mess for a price. But I wasn't interested. I had come this far by playing smart, and I wasn't going to let anyone buy their way out of this. The hardest part of all of this wasn't the court hearings or the legal battles. It was the emotional toll. Every time I saw her name pop up on my phone or in my inbox, there was that moment of disbelief. How could someone I once trusted betray me so completely? I had spent years building my life with her, and in the blink of an eye, she had shattered it. But there was no time for wallowing in self-pity. The past couldn't be changed. All I could do was move forward, and that's exactly what I did. It was during one of those long nights of reviewing documents and emails that I got another call from David. "It's over, Mike," he said. "We've got everything we need. We can finalize everything." The relief that flooded through me was immense. After months of fighting, it was finally time to close this chapter and move on with my life. I remember hanging up the phone and sitting in silence for a few moments. The weight of everything I had gone through hit me all at once. The sleepless nights, the pain, the confusion, the anger, all of it was finally coming to an end. I had fought and I had won. But more importantly, I had regained something I thought I had lost forever: control over my life. The next morning, I took a long walk through the base, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the man I had been when I first deployed, young, hopeful, believing in the vows I had made. And I thought about the man I had become, stronger, wiser, and far more capable of facing whatever life threw at me next. The world had tried to break me. It had tried to steal everything from me, even my future. But I hadn't let it. I had rebuilt from the ground up. And now I was ready to begin again. The day the court declared the case closed, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to collapse. I wasn't watching the ground beneath me crack. I was standing tall, unshaken. The battle was over, but the real work had only just begun. The first step was simple, almost mundane. I moved into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place with bare walls and no furniture, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I was living on my own terms. It wasn't a grand victory, but it was a start. And I knew this was where I would rebuild. Not just physically, but emotionally. I spent the first few days settling in. I set up the essentials, a bed, a desk for my work, some kitchen appliances. I didn't need much more than that. It was a blank canvas, and I was determined to paint it with a new life, one free from the past, one free from the betrayal that had threatened to destroy me. I also threw myself into work. I knew that finding stability meant I had to keep my focus sharp. I took on freelance projects that I had put off while deployed. I reconnected with old contacts, built new connections, and started working on a project I'd been passionate about for years. It was something I had put on the back burner, believing that one day I'd have time to get to it. Well, today was that day. But it wasn't all about work. Slowly, I began to rediscover the simple pleasures of life that I had neglected. I started running every morning, the cool air on my face as I jogged through the city streets. I spent weekends hiking, exploring places I had never noticed before. I met new people, made new friends, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living again, not just existing, not just surviving. The more I lived, the more I realized just how much I had lost before and how much I had gained. This wasn't just about getting my life back. This was about creating something better than what I had before. Jenna had stolen my trust. She had tried to take everything from me. But what she didn't realize was that she had given me something even greater, a fresh start. A few months passed, and as the days turned into weeks, I began to look at life through a new lens. I started thinking about the future not in terms of what had been taken, but in terms of what was still ahead. What I could create. What I could become. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that nothing in life is certain. Not love, not trust. But one thing was for sure, I had the strength to rebuild. I had the power to rise from the ashes and create something better than what had burned down. I was the architect of my future, and I was no longer waiting for the world to give me a second chance. I was taking it. And that's exactly what I did. Months had passed since the divorce was finalized. The legal battle was long over, and the house was mine. My life, in many ways, had found a rhythm I hadn't thought possible when it all began. I had rebuilt, piece by piece, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. Yet there was still one thing I hadn't quite come to terms with, the possibility of moving forward. The possibility of letting someone else in. I had spent so much time focusing on the future, on rebuilding what had been torn apart, that I hadn't allowed myself to truly live in the present. I hadn't allowed myself to consider love again. And in some ways, it felt safer that way. The pain from my past was still there, buried deep, but it was a familiar ache. The thought of opening myself up again to trust someone new was terrifying. I wasn't sure if I could do it, or if I even wanted to. But as time went on, I realized that I didn't want to live in fear anymore. I didn't want to let the scars of my past define me. I wanted to choose my future, and that meant not just building a career, a life, but also opening myself to the possibility of something more. I wasn't the same person I had been when Lisa and I first got together. I had grown, changed, and learned. But one thing I still had to learn was how to be vulnerable again. It was one weekend when everything shifted. I met someone. Her name was Sarah. She wasn't like anyone I had met before. Strong, confident, and completely unafraid of who she was. She didn't need anyone to fix her, and I didn't need anyone to fix me. We were two people who simply enjoyed each other's company without any pretense, without any games. It felt natural, comfortable, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. We went out for coffee, then dinner, then a walk around the city. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. We just connected, talked, and laughed. And for those few hours, I realized something important. I didn't have to hold on to the past to move forward. The past had shaped me, yes, but it didn't have to control me. I didn't have to be defined by the mistakes I had made or the ones that had been made against me. I could choose to let go, to trust, and to love again. But only when I was ready. And in that moment, I knew that I was ready. As Sarah and I sat on a park bench that evening, watching the sunset together, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't because I had found someone new, it was because I had found myself. I had learned how to live again, how to trust again, and most importantly, how to love myself. That was the true victory. The one I hadn't expected. The months after meeting Sarah were some of the most transformative I had ever experienced. I had built a life I could be proud of. I had rebuilt my career, my finances, and my heart. But now, standing at the crossroads of the past and future, I had to make one final choice. Was I ready to move forward with someone else, or was I better off alone, learning to navigate life on my own? Sarah was incredible. Smart, funny, compassionate. But more than that, she saw me for who I had become, not for who I used to be. That made all the difference. She didn't judge me for my past mistakes, nor did she expect me to be perfect. She understood the scars I carried, and instead of running away, she stood by me. But the decision wasn't as simple as it seemed. There was still a part of me that held back, a part that feared opening up to someone again, especially after everything I had gone through. The thought of trusting someone completely, of sharing my heart with them again, it terrified me. Could I really love again without fear? Could I be vulnerable without feeling exposed? One evening, as we sat on the couch in my apartment, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing at all, Sarah turned to me with a look in her eyes that I couldn't quite read. "You don't have to rush," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere. But I do want you to know, whatever you decide, it's your choice. I'll be here, but it's your decision to make." And that's when I realized something. I had spent so long trying to control everything, trying to fix every broken part of my life. But this moment, this decision, wasn't something I had to control. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was about choosing what came next. It was about allowing myself to be happy, to embrace the possibility of love without letting the past dictate my every move. The next day, I took Sarah's hand and we went for a walk in the park, just like we had done on our first date. As we strolled along the path, I felt the weight of the decision lift from my shoulders. I didn't need to know what the future held. I didn't need to know every step of the journey. All I needed was the courage to move forward and the strength to trust in the love I had found. When we stopped at a bench overlooking the lake, I turned to her, looked her in the eyes, and said, "I'm ready." I wasn't just ready to love again. I was ready to live again. I was ready to embrace the future without fear. And this time, I wasn't doing it alone. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after everything fell apart? What was the hardest part of your journey? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes all it takes is one person's story to inspire someone else to keep going. And if you enjoyed this journey of resilience, strength, and finding the courage to move forward, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring story. Let's keep this conversation going together. Thank you for being here.